Welcome to Taking the Myth, your topical, skeptical discussion show. I'm Stephen Knight, and joining me is the excellent Iram Ramzan. Iram, how the hell are you?
I'm not too shabby. How about you?
Good, not too bad. How's lockdown life?
Well, we have got certain freedoms, although we have to be covered in masks in certain areas now. But by and large, lockdown has been lifted. We can go to shops, we can go to the office if we want, we can get on trains and on the tube, but it still resembles a ghost town here. I don't know if you've been out and about in Manchester, but certainly in London it's just nowhere near as busy as it used to be before.
In my local area, it looks like business as usual. I've not actually been into Manchester city centre since this whole thing started. I did go to a drive-in cinema the other night for the first time ever, which was fun. This mask thing, though, is turning out to be more controversial than I imagined it would. And I don't know where you are on it.
They've since Friday, face coverings have been mandatory now in like shops, banks, takeaways, post offices, and supermarkets, and yet you don't have to wear one in pubs and restaurants, museums, cinemas, theatres. Although I'm pretty sure I've read reports of where people have been told to wear a mask when they went to the theatre, so I'm really confused by that. But by and large, if you go into an indoor area, you have to wear a mask now, and I'm just amazed that the public is largely in favour of wearing them. I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of wearing masks as a whole. I mean, I think if people want to wear them and they feel safer wearing them, then by all means do wear them. And I think, if people work in hospitals or care homes, then you should take extra precautions and wear PPE. But I just don't get why they have to make it mandatory, especially with cases falling and deaths falling as well. There seem to be a lot of reports about certain areas having spikes of cases, but don't seem to be spikes of deaths, touch wood. I don't know what you think, but I just wonder why they had to introduce them now, as lockdown has largely been lifted and as deaths have just fallen dramatically. Maybe it's a psychological thing. Maybe it's a way of coaxing people out of their houses, because for months everyone was just saying stay in, scared everyone to death, and now the government's trying to get people out and about again, in order to get the economy going.
That's a good point about the psychology, because I must admit that when I'm shopping now and everyone's got masks on, it does create some sort of artificial sense of a clinical environment. You feel
safer. It's also about shame as well. I think if you don't wear it does embarrass you into wearing it.
Yeah, but I mean, what I didn't expect from it all is it's become some sort of beacon for the argument of government versus liberty. People are really protesting the idea of having to wear a mask, and it feels like such a little sacrifice to make it in the grand scheme of things. There are people who are essentially saying it's just another way of government coercion and control, and I just kind of think of all the things to go to war over, wearing a little mask when you're going down the veg aisle of Tesco, it's not the end of the world, is it? It's not ration books and blackouts. And
you're right, it seems like a small thing, but the problem is that since this pandemic began, it seems to be, one thing after another. First it was a lockdown and, so many different rules we had to abide by, and if we don't, then fines. You risk being fined for it. I mean, it's so much worse in, say, places like Spain, where you have to wear it every time you go out, regardless. You could be out in the open air and you have to wear it in Spain now. And, the measures are much more draconian. But, it's just a case of how, what's next? Because I wasn't a fan of this whole slippery slope argument, and a few people were making that in the beginning, saying, what's going to happen next? Lockdown. We lock down now, when will it end? And then what will we have to do next? And I thought, not really convinced by that. But now, as I see that we have to wear face masks in most places now, or at least shamed into wearing them if you don't wear them, I just think, yeah, they're mandatory now, and the legislation is there and won't be reviewed until at least 6 months' time. They could effectively be in place for a year. Do we really want to be wearing face masks for a year? I certainly don't. I mean, I know there are some people who are saying it's not that big a deal. Yeah, maybe some of us are blowing it out of proportion. Okay, fine, you only have to wear it when you go into certain shops. But what if they go down the line of the Spanish and say, right, every time you step out of the house, you have to wear a mask, because that's what's happened there. There's nothing to suggest that it can't happen here. It seems to be more rules after the other. I think if you want to wear it, and if there are certain areas where you think that there might be more of a risk, fine. I've no issue with that. But I just would worry about our future, to be quite honest with you. Looking around London, looking like a complete ghost town. No one wants to really go out, get on public transport, or go to the office. Whereas, there are other smaller towns and villages that seem to be picking up a bit. It's the cities that seem to be dead right now.
Well, regardless of your opinions on masks, there's a really massive issue on this whole topic that I think you may have overlooked, and I shall read you a headline from the Daily Mail. Here, I'm trigger warning to those of you sensitive to the Daily Mail. The headline is, "Are masks giving men a license to leer? Women report a rise in aggressive eye contact since face coverings became commonplace, as an expert warns they provide anonymity for threatening behaviour." Now, it's interesting, actually, because when I was in Tesco the other day, and I had my...
Were you leering?
Well, here's the funny thing, because I had my face mask on.
You leerer.
And the woman at the checkout was making jokes and being quite funny and friendly. And I remember looking at her and smiling because I was amused by what she was saying. And then I realised she can't see me smiling. All she can see is me staring at her. So I'm just wondering. And then I had this debate about whether or not your eyes give away your mood anyway, because there's so many muscles on your face, and there's a lot going on in the eyes when you're happy or sad. So maybe she didn't think I was a psychopath. Maybe she did understand that I was smiling under my medical mask. But what are your thoughts on this idea of it providing a veil of anonymity for men to give women a good leer?
Well, maybe it gives women anonymity to leer at men as well. Let's not be sexist here. Women can leer as well. Not that I leer, obviously.
And who uses the word leer?
Yeah, leer. Whatever. That's a very interesting one, because when I was on the tube, there was a guy who was just staring at me, and it did look really creepy, I'll be honest with you. And I thought, how on earth is he... why is he staring at me? He can only see my eyes and my eyebrows and, the bridge of my nose. He can't really see anything else. And, my hair. I mean, okay, fine, all those features that are visible are fabulous. But still,
But what I don't get is I don't understand why covering your mouth gives men the extra level of protection to kind of sneak a look, because this is what my tinted shades are for. That's what I was going to say.
That's what your sunglasses
sunglasses provide that. I mean, there's nothing more. There's nothing more awkward for me personally than being on public transport, and sometimes you just lock eyes with somebody completely accidentally, and then you look away, and then you think, I'm just going to have a quick peek back to see if they've noticed I've locked eyes with them, and you do exactly the same thing again, and then it becomes a little bit of a game of wills not to look again, and both people probably feel awkward afterwards. And the sunglasses, that's what sunglasses are for. And I'm a people watcher. I don't know about you, but I like to observe, not through bedroom windows, just in general.
You've got night vision goggles, haven't you?
Night vision goggles and a telescope and a sneaking suit.
Donuts at the side. But what's interesting about face masks?
Nothing.
Well, yeah. So a friend of mine was saying, because I was just looking at him, and he said, I can't tell whether you're smiling. Are you actually smiling at me right now? And I had a blank expression. And then when I smiled under my mask, he went, oh, actually, yeah, I can tell you're smiling. And you can. And I remember, because I've started going back into work a few days here and there. Social distance, of course, and there was a woman outside the office who were both wearing masks, and we were going in, and we did recognise each other as well, and we both smiled, and I could tell she smiled at me. And when I was on the bus, there was a little girl wearing a mask, which I think is ridiculous. I don't think children should be wearing them, but maybe she just wanted to wear one because her mum was wearing one, and she just wanted to mess around with the mask on, and she started messing around and playing games with me because I was stood right opposite her. And, she was just like, I could tell she was making faces under it and rolling her eyes, and I started doing the same thing, and she was just laughing and playing along. So I think, yeah, you can tell when someone's smiling under a mask, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the end of social interactions per se, but the problem is also it makes it difficult to hear people when they're wearing one as well. I've had to sometimes just take my mask off to repeat what I'm saying, or the other person has, because their voice is muffled.
Everyone sounds like Bane.
Yeah.
Also, I pride myself on my amateur ability to lip read as well, so that's that gone. But
yeah, I know there are some exceptions to this. So if you have breathing difficulties and if you have asthma, you don't have to wear one. And if you're deaf as well, again, same. I'm just hoping these rules won't be in place for like a year, because do you really want to live in a society where everyone's masked up? Do you remember last year and the year before we were having discussions about the niqab, and Boris Johnson describing Muslim women as letterboxes if they choose to wear a niqab, and hey, we're all letterboxes now. So.
Well, it's just obviously there was some debate about the efficacy of masks when all this started, and the consensus seemed to be that they were pretty much had a negligible effect. Now it's mandatory, so obviously I don't think this is some great indicator of government inefficiency or incompetence, although many will argue that.
I think it is. I think this government has really shown itself to be so incompetent on so many levels. Now people going on holiday to Spain, they'll have to quarantine themselves on their return.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was fine.
But surely that's got to go in line with new cases. So there's been a spike in Spain. Even if you say the government's got it wrong, it seems to me like they're trying to follow what they think's the strongest logic and scientific advice. Well, and they will have made mistakes, no doubt about it, but it doesn't feel to me they're making mistakes because they're bumbling through it. It feels like an ever-changing situation when they're trying to adapt and change the rules depending on the situation on the ground at the time, which is constantly changing. But then it's difficult to know when... This is the thing, there's so much partisanship in this debate. I can't tell whether someone's pointing out incompetence in good faith or it's just another case of fuck the Tories.
Yeah.
And that really annoys me.
I get what you mean. I think no matter what the Tories would have done, for people on the left, it would have just been a case of, too little, too late, they're just shit. For me, it's not a partisan issue. I'm just looking at it solely from the point of whether their policies actually work. And, it's like they brought in quarantine for people flying in as well, and that was only in place for maybe 2 weeks at the most. They ditched that policy. And again, they brought that in, 4 months into the pandemic?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, some of it just seems really ridiculous. And then they tried to claim, was it Matt Hancock or Boris Johnson tried to claim that their advice to care homes was clear from the beginning. And actually it wasn't, care homes really at the beginning should have had extra protection. But maybe a lot of this is hindsight, we won't really know the effects for a while yet. And there probably will be an inquiry as to what's happened. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just really, I feel quite sad sometimes because I just wonder what our future is going to look like. after all this is over, people who are above a certain age, I think they will be fine. But, people our age and younger, where we've still got a life to live. And what kind of life are we going to be living when, so many people will be losing jobs, the economy is just going to go to shit as well. Maybe I'm being a bit too, cynical here. I just hope things do pick up, really. But it's just hard not to get down when you see all this happening around you.
Yeah, I'm getting fed up now, but like I keep saying, it's not the war, is it? I'm the kind of person I could be living in a ditch, and I'd be like, well, at least it's a nice ditch. So I think I've got a while to go yet. But I did want to mention something that's pretty much been ubiquitous in overtly left-leaning, white guilt-ridden circles since the George Floyd killing and the subsequent BLM protests, and that's Robin DiAngelo's book White Fragility. And I actually think it was released in 2018, but it appears to be everywhere now. And
why is it everywhere now? I mean, has something happened to bring it back to the fore? Because I remember reading reviews about it.
But I think these books come back because a lot of middle-class white guilt people who have seen what's going on in terms of George Floyd and the BLM movement have wondered, how can I make all this about me? How can I get in on this action? And
it really is. It's quite a self-centered kind of thing, isn't it? I mean, there are some people who genuinely, want there to be solutions to these problems, but then equally, a lot of this is very self-centered, borderline narcissism. Oh, how can I make this about myself?
And the reason I've delved into it now is because it's become so popular to the point where it's been recommended at some of the highest levels of corporate business for staff to read. It's on the curriculum in universities and things like that. It's in the front window of all bookshops at the moment because of what's going on, and people are really buying into it. And I'm seeing white people talk about their own white fragility and how they must do more to eradicate this white supremacy that lives inside them, like some sort of bizarre racist tapeworm that we were born with. And
there's nothing more boring than
nauseating.
Somebody just talking about their own skin colour.
Yeah,
a lot.
And it's we talked about this on the last podcast, how everyone's defining themselves and others by the colour of their skin, and nothing good will come of this. So I actually went into this book. I knew that I probably wouldn't agree with it, but I fully expected there to be something to grapple with. And I'm talking about, maybe she'll pepper in some statistics that I'll have to cross-examine, and make sure she's not lying. Maybe she'll make a good argument that will, soften my view in one way or the other. And I'm not joking here, there was literally nothing in there that made me think she's onto something. And it was worse than that. It's all opinionated, anecdotal, assumption backed up by no sort of real social sciences or statistic. And it's so circular in its reasoning. I can sum this book up in 2 minutes. If you're white, you are racist, and if you don't think you're racist, it's because you are racist. And even if you understand you are racist, you are still racist, and you will not be able to eradicate your racism as long as you live. That's it.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and it's so belittling of black people. She speaks about them like they're toddlers incapable of civil discourse or rational thought, as if they're all one homogenous group who have the same politics, same socioeconomic status, same opinions on crime, same opinions on politics. And it's like a white supremacist has written it, but tried to give it a sort of Trojan horse aspect of anti-racism. And I'm not for book burning per se, and I've always been against it, but my lord, that would be some mighty fine kindling.
Maybe just use it as a doorstop.
Yeah, perhaps. But again, this is just further evidence of my white fragility.
But there's a line in there apparently where she writes, "I believe that white progressives cause the most daily damage to people of colour." And actually, that kind of made sense in a way to me, because I thought to myself, yeah, you do, because, unfortunately, like the white progressives, as you mentioned, they view, black or minority ethnic people, they view them as one block. They're quite racist in that sense. They just don't get it.
They think they're incapable of agency as well. They're not individuals. As a matter of fact, in this book, she argues that the concept of the individual is a white concept, and we've rigged the game. And as a matter of fact, this push towards individualism is further helping white supremacy spread. So we shouldn't think in terms of the individual anymore, because that's a purely white concept. And I thought that was like individual liberty, one of the most amazing principles imaginable in terms of human rights and the Enlightenment. And she throws it away as a white idea. I really, really struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean, people like that, they tend to view all people of colour. I hate that phrase, but for argument's sake, let's just use it. They view people of colour in the same way. They're not capable of thinking for themselves, and when they do, and when they go against the grain as well, they're the wrong kind of, ethnic minorities. I mean, look what happened with Sajid Javid and Priti Patel in the Conservative government. Because they're Tories and because they're right wing, they're a disgrace to their kind. Whereas a white Tory wouldn't have been described in such a way. But, where all brown people basically have to be left-wing, they all have to be Labour voters as well, and I actually find that more offensive and more racist than anything else. It's that kind of... See, I could easily deal with a skinhead or a thug, because at least their hatred towards me or their bigotry towards me is very obvious.
Yeah, it's honest. You know where you
are.
Well.
Yeah, I know where I stand with somebody like that. Whereas with these people, I'm not all of them, because I don't think all of them mean to do any harm, but I'm just talking about, the certain types of them who are very, very vocal. They're far more dishonest, and they can hide their bigotry a lot better as well, that you almost can't really tell that they're being bigoted.
But yeah, they're too stupid to be as harmful as Rob and DiAngelo. That's the difference. But right, I'm just going to give you a few examples. Right, so one of the main arguments she makes in the book is that if you are accused of being racist and you get defensive, or you argue, or you deny it, that's further proof of your white fragility. So what you must do if you are being accused of being racist, and she goes to pains to point out it doesn't matter how, when, or why. She actually uses them words. It doesn't matter how, when, or why you are being accused of racism. Not only should you be grateful for being called racist, but you should respond in a number of particular ways. And she gives examples of ways you should respond to being called racist. Now, I want you to just think here. Does this sound like a person who's ever spoken to more than 5 people in her entire life? So bear in mind, somebody's calling me a racist, and it could be anywhere, anytime, for any reason. She suggests in the book that I should opt for one of these responses. Now, first one is, I appreciate this feedback. The second response is, this is very helpful. Another who speaks like this, right? Another response is, it's my responsibility to resist defensiveness and complacency.
Who the fuck actually talks
Oh, it
like
gets
that?
worse. The next one. This is hard, but also stimulating and also important. Sounds like a bad porn line.
I'm just gonna... That sounds like something I've said.
And the last one.
Friday.
Oops, it is inevitable that I have this pattern. I want to change it. Who the fuck speaks like this?
Oh my God, nobody sane talks like that. I mean, that sounds like something Meghan Markle would say, actually.
She completely refuses to even entertain the possibility that sometimes certain accusations of racism will be false. We see this happen every single day with false accusations of racism.
I think Trevor Phillips once did a review of it, and he basically said it's, above all, a zealot's atonement for past sins.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, what her background is, but there's a very good case to be made there, to be honest. It's like with Boris Johnson right now. He's recovered from corona, and because he was obese, his mission is now not just to lose weight, but get everybody else in the country fit and healthy. There's nothing like the zeal of the convert.
Well, that might be a nice little segue, because our Boris is not a particularly healthy man, obviously. He is overweight. I do think we should be able to start talking about weight a bit more honestly in our society, not necessarily tiptoe around it. I know when I've tipped over the line of tubbiness, and my weight fluctuates by about 12 pounds throughout the year, up and down, depending on what I'm doing. Lockdown has just been nothing but cake and pajamas. So that's...
Oh yeah, in the beginning, I definitely put on a few pounds because of lockdown.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I've kept it mostly off because I've been working as normal. Whereas I don't know what it must be like for people furloughed and with just, constant access to the kitchen as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know where the line is. I know my healthy weight range, where I need to be considered a normal healthy weight range. I'm not sure everybody else does. Well, certainly the people who are overweight probably don't. But one of the ideas that the government has proposed, which it'd be nice to get your opinion on, I'm very cynical, but the idea is that junk food adverts on the television should be banned before 9 p.m. Now, the reasoning of this, I would imagine, is that so the younger viewers who are usually in bed by that time won't see the adverts from McDonald's or KFC or Domino's or whatever it is if they're banned before 9 p.m. That's typically referred to as the watershed in the UK, the 9 p.m. watershed. After 9 p.m. you can start hearing naughty words and see some boobs on the television. I think that's how it works. I'm not sure it's worded that way. So what's your idea on? I mean, what do you think the efficacy of such a move would be to ban junk food adverts before 9 p.m?
Well, how do they define junk food? Because,
good question.
Isn't there... There's... They've been trying to do this for so many years. I mean, David Cameron's government tried doing it before, back in 2015. They've had so many government efforts to do this, and the plans had to be scrapped because they just would not work. They were too complex. I think... This is again so ridiculous. I get it. Boris Johnson, he's recovered from corona, wants to get healthy. Good on him. You should get in shape, especially if you're overweight or obese. You should do it to be healthy. You should do it for yourself. And I think most people do know what they should and shouldn't eat by and large. They know that you shouldn't be eating more than a certain number of calories per day. We all know what the rough guidelines are, and if you want to lose weight, you eat less than you need.
Here's a quick question. If you're out shopping and you see an especially large person pushing a trolley around, do you scope out what they've got in their trolley and then think, yep, that'll do it?
Do you know what? Actually, no,
I do.
I haven't
all
done
the time.
Have you?
And I'm not talking about people who are carrying a little bit of weight. I'm not necessarily judgmental. I'm talking about people who are struggling to walk because they're so large.
Okay.
And I look at their trolley all the time just to get an idea of how that happens. How does somebody get into that state? And it doesn't happen by accident. We're talking about people who are eating 3 or 4 times more than the average person, and that actually takes some effort. But, I mean, I don't think it's the States.
What's in their trolleys? Is it what you think?
It's wall-to-wall sugary drinks, crisps, yogurts, strangely. It's always yogurts, often the, like chocolate mousses, the Milky Bar ones. It's just basically anything that's calorie-dense, full of sugar, snackable, that kind of thing, sausage rolls, and a lot of it, you know what I mean? I'm talking, like, lots of it. It's not necessary. See, here's the thing. You can live on pizza and burgers if you want, as long as you keep within your recommended, daily calorie total. But these people...
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, how do they define junk food? Because if they think burgers and fries are junk food, like, what if that's your treat for the week? Because you normally eat within your limit, and then you think, it's Saturday, let's treat myself to a burger and fries. Why should you be penalised for that? Because other people can't control themselves. Yeah. I'm sorry, but I think, there are some cases where people, maybe they have thyroid issues and it is very difficult for them to lose weight. Or if a woman has polycystic ovaries syndrome, it does make it more difficult for you to lose weight. But at the same time, a lot of it is about willpower. And, there are some psychological reasons involved as well. A lot of people do comfort eat, but they don't do it because they don't know it's bad for them. They know that doing that is bad for them. I know so many people who have, gained weight over the years because they were comfort eating, because they were feeling really low and in a bad state psychologically, and they reached for food as, for comfort, and the result of that was them gaining weight. But they know that what they were doing was going to have that effect on them. And I think genuinely people should be helped. I think if you do have psychological issues with food, then there should be some services out there to help you lose weight. But I think by and large, it all does come down to willpower. If you can't help yourself,
it feels like it's an individual responsibility, and that's why this idea to ban things that are the government mandating bans on adverts feels like performance, feels like theatre. It feels like a way of the government saying, look, we're investing in this obesity problem, we're taking action on this obesity problem without actually doing anything, because I'm not entirely convinced there is anything they can do. It is individual responsibility.
There was this report by the House of Lords as well where they were saying, government guidelines on how to lose weight, they're very unrealistic and they penalise poor people, like cooking from scratch, eating a Mediterranean diet. And I thought, actually, that's actually really patronising as well, to suggest that poor people can't eat healthily. Healthy food is not expensive. It is not more expensive to cook from scratch. Like, for example, if my mum's going to cook a curry for the entire household, she can easily cook like a lentil curry. You just need a bag of lentils, and that will last you a good while. You just need lentils and some spices, onions, put that all together, and that's it. You've got a meal for scratch for the whole family. It's just that some people, maybe they can't be bothered cooking from scratch, or maybe they don't have the time so they reach for something more convenient. But it's all to do with but to suggest that eating healthily is always really more expensive, it's not. Well, it really isn't.
There's a bit of a misleading emphasis on exercise when it comes to weight loss, and I've already noticed that they've spoke about doctors prescribing cycling as a way of burning calories, which great. Exercise is incredibly important. It has so many benefits, not only mental but physical. However, if you can cycle for 3 hours a day, if you eat too many calories, you're not going to lose weight. So it's it's like,
what they say, you can't outrun a bad diet.
Exactly. That's a great turn of phrase.
Or outcycle.
Yeah. So
you can't.
It's 90% diet, and then the exercise can complement it in a way. So there needs to just be this more of a focus on a calorie deficit and getting people to understand exactly what that means. What are the easy ways to achieve it? I also think sort of Western society have got in this mindset of 3 squared meals a day and then snacking in between. I don't really think the average person needs that much food every day.
I think if you stuck to 3 meals and didn't snack in between, you could easily stay in your calorie limit. I think it's the snacking in between, and it depends what you're snacking on as well. If you're going to be snacking on, say, fruit and maybe some vegetables, you're not really going to add many calories onto that. But if you have like a healthy breakfast, say you have like 2 eggs and toast, or in your case just toast, and you have a modest lunch and evening meal, but then in between you're having a few chocolate bars and you're having some crisps, that is going to pile on the calories. And I know some people have been doing the intermittent fasting diet, where they won't have breakfast, but they'll have lunch and they'll have dinner before a certain time, and just make sure they up their water intake throughout the day, and that works for some people.
All right, well, this very quickly became the diet podcast, didn't it? Let's
if any more tips, I have a whole plan.
Right, well, I've got a list of stuff, so I'm going to let you choose, because we never get through everything, and I'm always like, we missed that off. So basically what I've got is the police considering dropping the term Islamist jihadist from their description of terrorism when it happens. We've got Bianca Williams being stopped by the police in her car. We've got Shamima Spaghetti Bagram winning her appeal. We've got Owen Jones being attacked in a pub and his attacker being jailed. And we've got one of the leaders of the Islamic Relief Charity being exposed, shock horror, as an anti-Semite.
Shock.
So, spin the wheel. What should we talk about?
Should we do Islamism? Not literally
do Islamism. Let's do a bit of jihad. That's an interesting one. So I don't know how much you've read about this, but what is the possible motivation for removing the motivation for certain terrorist acts? Do they think the public are stupid, is my first question.
This is a tricky one. Are people stupid?
Yeah.
Anyway, so basically, so the Times did this story, I think was it last week, where the National Association of Muslim Police requested at this event that the police could drop the term Islamist terrorism and jihadis when describing terrorists who claim Islam as their motive. And there were a few other people who, gung-ho about it. Basically because, most people, they say, can't distinguish between Islam and Muslims. But that's the reason why the term Islamist was coined, for exactly that reason, because it's acknowledging that these people are Muslims. They're inspired by a version of Islam, and it makes that distinction that it's not something that all Muslims believe or that mainstream Muslims believe. So they came up with some alternative terms, which were absolutely hilarious. So they claim terrorism, adherence of Osama bin Laden's ideology, and terrorists abusing religious motivations. Ooh, that's
faith claim
that's
terrorism.
Really catchy.
Terrorist abusing
imagine
religious
that in the
motivation.
headline.
But the thing is, right, so I'm just going to lay it all out here. If you want to say that jihadis are Muslims and you want to say Muslims are committing acts of terror, that is actually accurate. That's true. Now, I tend to say Islamist because I understand. Okay, it's a good argument. You don't want to... I want to be understood. I want to communicate this issue as effectively as possible. So I understand that using the term Islamist is more politically effective in getting people to understand your point, because we know straight away that when you speak to normies on this issue and start talking about Islamic extremism, they tend to think you're some sort of EDL BNP type who's just got it in for those muzzies, when it's a really serious issue. So I do it because I want to communicate as effectively as possible. However, Muslims is accurate. So we've already given an inch there. And now we're being told Islamists isn't good enough. It's just another part of a concerted and passionate effort to whitewash any mention of Islam when it comes to terrorism.
The thing is, though, these alternatives aren't even correct, like adherence of Osama bin Laden's ideology. Islamism goes further than that. It goes further than that. You had, Abdul Wahab in Arabia in the 19th century, who was the practically the founder of Islamism. Thanks to him, we have the Wahhabi state in Saudi Arabia, which is just a very
nice
very
going,
literal,
dickhead.
Yeah. Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
So it's thanks to him we have this very literal version of Islam, and I think that's what the word Islamist does. It does separate Islam from terrorist acts, because you're right, since September 11, I guess that there was this bit of a backlash against Muslims, and innocent Muslims were being viewed with suspicion because of the behaviour of assholes, basically. And what this term Islamist does is it gets it into everyone's head that it's not necessarily Islam, although I know a lot of other people will find issue with that and say, actually, if you read Islamic scriptures, there is justification for what these terrorists do. But let's say, for argument's sake, the the word Islamist, for the lay person as well, it tells them that this person isn't necessarily following mainstream Islam, but following a very literal version of it in order to carry out an attack. And it then means that you're not blaming other Muslims, and you're also saying that other Muslims are not like that as well. And the whole point of using these terms is that we understand what's going on, we know what it is, we know what the problem is, and therefore we can try and find solutions to it. If you don't name the problem, you're never going to solve it. And then when people are being murdered in European cities or around the Middle East, it's important to know why it's happening.
Yeah.
You need to know that we're not just dealing with some random person or terrorists abusing religious motivations.
But then
we need to know what it is.
There's already a huge number of people who think there's a conspiracy to whitewash any influence of Islam on terrorism or any involvement of Islam. So there'll be people every time someone is declared mentally ill, or release the ethnicity of the attacker. The people on Twitter going mad. But here's something that's just occurred to me. So when somebody commits an act of terror or extremism or is planning to in the name of white supremacy, I want to know, and I see that in the headline and that's in the reports. Whereas I'm not going to be offended because it's got the word white in it and I happen to be white. And as a matter of fact, I could make a better argument that it shouldn't be used because white supremacy, certainly terrorist attacks in the guise of white supremacy in the UK, are far rarer and fewer and far between than Islamist attacks. And it certainly doesn't represent white culture as a whole or in any significant way. So why are they using the word white? Well, it's because they're doing what they're doing for the ideology of white supremacy, and it's important to mention it. This is the game that's going to get played now. If people are asking for Islam to be scratched from the record when it comes to terrorist attacks or planned terrorist attacks, people will just say, well, why are you mentioning that it's right-wing terrorism? Because I'm right-wing, and that doesn't represent the right-wing as a whole. It's just one of them silly things where we just need to call a spade a spade. And if people are getting pissed off with Islamic extremism getting linked to Islam, focus your efforts more on the Islamic extremists that are making that necessary than the language used to describe those acts.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And, this has been happening since September 11 as well, then, July 7 bombings and every terrorist attack. It's been more about, this isn't Islam, let's stop attacking Islam, all Muslims aren't terrorists. We get that.
Yeah.
And all they seem to be focused on is Islamic PR, like they just want to make sure nothing bad ever is said about Islam, and there doesn't seem to be much of an effort to actually deal with the issue. And I think the other problem as well is that there are actually Muslims themselves who are working in this area, to counter terrorism, who are living in countries where Islamism is a problem. They're standing up to it. I mean, it would be doing them an injustice if we didn't use this term.
I agree. So I just hope they don't adopt this idea, and the public have a right to know the ideology of people trying to murder us, whether it's white supremacist ideology, whether it's Islamist ideology, whether it's Christians, And
also, it's such an academic thing to do as well. Oh, let's look at this term, and the definitions that they were coming up with, the alternatives, they just made no sense. Like with Islamophobia is an attack on Muslimness. I mean, fuck's sake. And most people don't even speak like that.
So, it might be worth, since this gentleman has come under a lot of criticism on this podcast, it might be worth mentioning some significant wrongdoing and vindication he's faced. That's the boy Jones, Owen Jones. Now, we have been incredibly critical of him on this podcast, but we've never wished violence on him or attacks. That's just not in my wheelhouse when it comes to disagreement. However, last year, I believe it might have been the start of this year. I think it's last year, actually. He was out trying to have a good time in a pub, and he was assaulted, and I think he was subjected to some homophobic abuse, and he's he seems to have suggested that he was targeted because of who he was and his views, which is just completely unacceptable on any level. I'm 100% on Owen Jones' side on this. At the time, a lot of people were calling him a liar, doubting his story, and it's just been confirmed that the man responsible, who's been described as a football hooligan in the tabloids, has been jailed for the assault and the attack, which is good news. And I think there are a number of people, I'm not just talking about overt, nasty, knuckle-dragging idiots giving him grief. That's pretty much a standard day in the life of Owen Jones, I believe. I think some sort of blue-ticky journalist types and people who should know better who were doubting his story and giving him a lot of grief. So, here we have a man who is gay, being the victim of a politically motivated and homophobic violent attack, and the response was to dismiss him and not take it serious. And I think that's incredibly shitty, regardless of what you think about the man.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's, oh God, I really can't stand him. But, I wouldn't wish any harm on him. He has the right to have his opinions, as long as what he's saying is accurate and he's not inciting any violence or anything. But he was on the radio, I think it was today, or was it yesterday? He was on the radio and he was talking about far-right extremism, and he said the assault on him is proof that Britain isn't fighting far-right extremism effectively. So apparently... in the attacker's home, they said there were photographs of him doing a Nazi salute. So
photographs of the attacker.
Yeah.
Right. Statement of Owen Jones.
Yeah. No. This is the guy who assaulted Owen Jones. That he, there were materials in his house that indicated he, was a proponent of the far right ideology and quite homophobic as well. And he was just saying, that because of that, that's proof that Britain isn't dealing with far-right extremism well enough. And you just have to think to yourself. Now, obviously, I think what happened to him is disgusting. And there's a way that maybe we can try and educate people better on how to deal with these nasty ideologies out there. And you think... someone like Owen Jones is very much in denial when it comes to, say, Islamist terror attacks.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about that, but I've noticed when there's something to do with the far right, everyone is just gung-ho about what we need to do, what the solutions are. Let's call them out for they're unacceptable. And then when it comes to Islamist terrorism, some people, especially on the left, they kind of just and ah about it and say, oh, well, this is a one-off attack. It's not representative of anything.
Yeah, he does whitewash Islamist terrorism and far-left extremism, and he made a great point, but I think he lacks a little bit of awareness of the logical conclusion at this point. He was talking about how the smears and hatred directed at him makes him a target when he's in public, and I think there is something to that. He does get accosted and attacked and shouted at, and very unsavoury types come at him when he's out and about, and he attributes smears and misinformation about him for that. But then again, he'll say incredibly inflammatory and false things about Douglas Murray, for instance. He'll literally point the finger at Douglas Murray for far right attacks that happen in the UK.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So he needs to understand that there is consequences for painting people as the devil. And another point as well, I've noticed in recent years, and I don't have the public profile of Owen Jones, but when I've been out doing video interviews around things linked to Tommy Robinson, so if he's doing these free speech rally or his Panodrama thing or whatever I can get to, or his speech in Speaker's Corner and things like that, and I've been there to film, I have noticed in recent years, because of his rhetoric about the fake news, how the journalists are all in it to smear any good working class, salt of the earth British lad, that kind of thing, has produced an extra air of hostility when it comes to media types. The amount of very uncomfortable situations I had to deal with when I had a camera on my shoulder at Tommy Robinson events, or when I got shoved into or pushed for no reason whatsoever, it kind of ramped up a little bit, because that wasn't the kind of thing that happened years ago. Now it is seen that if you're a media type or a journalist or a photographer and you're perceived to be the wrong type, you are a target for assault, as far as I can see. And that's only seemed to happen these last few years when people have been talking about the media in the sense that they have. And that's another thing. I do think there are biases within certain media strains that need discussing, but to talk about the media as one, homogenous group, again, I think is wrong also.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that you made, about the way Owen Jones talks about certain people he doesn't like. Now, if anything happened to them, could we then point the finger of blame at Owen Jones and say, actually, Owen, it's because of you and your supporters that led to so-and-so being attacked.
And I mean, in terms of the right, you made a great point about the right wing before, about how everyone calls it out. And that's one of the reasons why I've, in recent years, kind of focused more on the far left, because the far right never get a seat at the table in civil society or at government. I mean, there's a lot of people now thinking, but the Tories, if you think the Tories are far right, you're a fucking idiot. But the far left get a seat at the table everywhere. The far left seem to be behaving in extreme ways with impunity at the moment. And because they're doing it under the guise of a virtuous cause, it doesn't get the same level of attention and response as a far-right act would do. Can you name any institution anywhere in the UK or any media outlet or any sort of anyone with influence and power that you could reasonably label as far-right that people are listening to? I just don't see it.
Yeah, see, this is what I was saying on our previous podcast, where sometimes I think, the far left can be more dangerous because, they get listened to more often and the goalposts are shifted further to allow them to have a seat at the table. No one really does that for the far right. I know people like to talk about far right populist governments everywhere in the world, but, our government, for example, is supposed to be a conservative government. Don't think there's anything that conservative about it, to be honest.
No. So it might be worth mentioning our good friend Shamima Begum.
Spaghetti Bagram.
I mean, we've spoke about her a lot on this podcast. In short, young girl left the UK at 15 to become a jihadi bride.
Oh, I thought she just went off somewhere to get married and become a housewife.
Yeah.
Is that what she did?
Well, there's some reports and suggestions that she had slaves and helped, fit people into suicide vests and all that stuff. It's yet to be corroborated and confirmed, I believe, and it's almost impossible to confirm and corroborate all of that kind of things in a court anyway. But to cut a long story short, our former Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, stripped her of her citizenship and said goodbye, basically, and left her stranded in Syria. I think the general mood of the public was quite happy with that, although on principle I concede that we should probably bring her back. I don't know where you are with this. I'll get your thoughts on this in a second. But she's appealed. She's got her hotshot lawyer to appeal on her behalf, and she's won the appeal. The appeal basically suggests or says that she has the right to return to the UK and fight the loss of citizenship that she's been subjected to. So obviously, I think they're going to appeal that decision. So it's in limbo. She's not in the UK yet. It's yet to be seen whether she'll come back home. What is your thoughts on this entire fiasco?
Well, I always, I thought Sajid Javid made a massive mistake in revoking her citizenship. He really, really should have got legal advice before he did that, because now what he's done, he's kind of garnered a bit more sympathy for her. It would have been fair enough having this ongoing discussion about what should happen to her, but now that her citizenship was revoked, I mean, obviously now she's appealed it, but it gave, some people started sympathising with her, and then they started making it all about race, like, they got rid of her citizenship because she's brown and because she's Muslim, even though Jihadi Jack, a white guy, also lost his citizenship because they think he had Canadian citizenship as well.
Pretty sure a white jihadi bride got droned to Kingdom Come in Syria as well, so she should thank her lucky stars.
Yeah. It's a very tricky one because, when she and her friends travelled to Syria, Mark Rowley from the Met at the time, he said they have no reason to fear if nothing else comes to light that we'll be treating them as terrorists. So her lawyer, Tasneem Okunji, said that effectively this is immunity for her and for her friends. I think the other two are dead now anyway.
That can happen.
Yeah, it can happen in a war zone.
Thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. Ministers are now introducing certain terror laws to target ISIS fighters who can't be prosecuted for other crimes because of a lack of proof. So they'll make it an offence punishable by up to 10 years in jail for anyone entering a quote-unquote designated area abroad, unless they can provide a quote-unquote reasonable excuse. And being a housewife I don't think counts. But that can't be applied retrospectively to Shamima Begum.
Got you.
So for her, it's a very... I don't know if she'll actually be charged with anything. I know there's a saying that she probably doesn't really... she's not exactly a threat because, she didn't really have a competent role. And there was a piece actually last year in the FT where somebody said to a journalist, I think it was a police officer who kind of said off the, unnamed, said she'll probably end up writing a book, meaning because she'll just come here, she won't go to jail, and everyone will be so fascinated by her story they'll just want to interview her and convince her to write a book. Maybe she might convince other people to stay away from terrorist groups as well.
That's the problem, isn't it? Like how she may come home, we may not have sufficient evidence to convict her of anything, and then she goes on to do round-the-world media appearances and writes a best-selling book, and just essentially could profit and benefit from terrorist actions. There's got to be a better way, surely.
Well, the thing is, they knew at the time, when all these people were going off to fight jihad, that they could eventually return back.
And many of them have.
Sorry, they could eventually come back. And yeah, some have. We don't know what's happening to them, and it's quite chilling to think what they could be up to, because you don't just give up an ideology like that overnight. So I wonder if they're going through some sort of rehabilitation program. But as we saw with the London Bridge attack, the terrorists there pretended to go along with the de-radicalisation program and then ended up, trying to murder people. So people can lie. The thing with Shamima, though, is because she was really young when she went. So I think that's the dilemma with her. If she had been 18 or 19 when she went, then I think everyone would be like, well, fuck you, see you later. But at the same time, she is a British citizen. Is there a way that we can maybe prosecute someone like her or others in an international court? I don't know what the legality of that is, but that would save them having to come home and getting away with their crimes abroad.
Well, we'll see what happens. I've got a feeling that she'll be home. I just feel the momentum's heading in that direction, and begrudgingly I accept that is probably the right decision, as I've said before in other podcasts, but mainly because I think she's our responsibility. Or if she's not our responsibility, she's certainly not the responsibility of the people of Syria who have also suffered under her as well. And
people of Syria, Syria can't even fucking deal with its own citizens right now. How are they gonna prosecute jihadi brides?
If a Syrian entered the UK and carried out acts of terrorism or even, violent crime of any kind, or any crime of any kind really, we'd want to reserve the right to deport them back to Syria post-haste. I certainly would. So I kind of afford and extend that same right and principle to the Syrians. So we'll see what happens, but I just hope that, even if she does get convicted, she's not going away forever. I really dislike this girl, Iram, and I feel conflicted about this whole thing. I have no compassion, I have no empathy for her whatsoever. Even though she was young, this is subject to change. I am very fickle. I might come back and forward on this, but I have no empathy or compassion for her whatsoever. If I found out that she'd probably spend the rest of her life languishing in some Syrian hellhole, I'd probably shrug. And I don't know what that says about me, but I kind of think I want to reserve my empathy for the people who suffered under her.
I'm not going to lose any sleep over what happens to her, I'll be honest as well. I'm more concerned about the innocent people in Iraq and Syria who had to put up with fucking ISIS and their barbaric laws and the way they treat the people there, especially the Yazidi women who are just, dehumanized under under their so-called caliphate.
It's just it's a torture rape tour, basically, and I don't think a lot of the well-meaning lefties in the Labour Party who are talking about her solely in compassionate humanitarian grounds, and they probably should. I don't quite think they understand what happens out there. I also think
that there's a little bit of sexism at play here. That if Shamima Begum had been a man and went out there, we would not be sympathising with him at all. But because it's a woman, we seem to think that women are incapable of being horrible, nasty terrorists, and they are just as capable, and they've proven to be so.
All right, it's not a competition.
Well, certainly not a close one. Just I'm all for equality, Stephen. Hello. But there is a bit of sexism at play here. I just think it's really patronising to suggest that she wouldn't be a danger. We don't know if she'd be a danger or not. We simply don't know. But have you noticed now that whenever she's in the media, she comes on. She's changed the way she dresses to look like she's a bit more integrated. So she'll have on a bit more of a colourful scarf. She'll have a Union Jack cushion in the background. Just to say, hey, I'm from London, innit? Me apples and pears.
Yeah.
White geezer.
Yeah. Jihadi makeover. Right. Do you think it's worth spending 5 minutes or so just to run through some quick questions? Do you have time?
Why not?
Let's see what we got. Okay, so this is worth reading because it's fairly amusing. Jake Stone is asked, what would happen if Pinocchio said, my nose will not grow? Put that in. Why don't you put that in? We have Jake. You are welcome.
Thanks, Jake, for that enlightening question.
Please discuss the recent seeming meteoric rise of blatant, explicit anti-Semitism coming from the NOI, I think that's the Nation of Islam, and its adherents, and why they seem to get at worst a slap on the Twitter wrist. That's from Disco Kryptonite, which is my new band name. That's excellent. So there's been a lot of anti-Semitism doing the rounds on Twitter of late, and I say of late, it's just standard fare, really, because what I've noticed is if I see some anti-black racism, I can tell you 10 other things about that person's politics. If I see some Antifa supporting account, I can tell you another 10 things about their politics. Easy. If I see some anti-Semitism on Twitter, all bets are off. They could be far left, They could be far right, they could be centrist. Everyone loves a bit of Jew bashing, it seems. It seems like the only thing that unites the far left and the far right. Sorry, did I say Jew bashing? I mean Zionist, anti-Israel. I forgot what. I can't remember.
I think that's what the Nation of Islam are doing. They're Zionist bashing, not Jew bashing.
Yeah.
Why do they get at worst a slap on the wrist? I wonder if it's because they're black and they're Muslims. It would, am I being a bit
I think
unfair here?
I always say this, the problem though with anti-Semitism is, and this is what makes it especially sinister, is because I know it's not necessarily, I have to be careful how I word this, but some smart people are anti-Semites, and when I say they're obviously stupid for being anti-Semites, but it's not garden variety racism. It's quite pseudo-intellectual. It's mixed in with conspiracy. It's a tapestry of bullshit weaved so eloquently sometimes and elegantly that it can take reasonably minded people in sometimes. You can go down rabbit holes and be convinced. Whereas if someone's just anti-black, or someone says black people are stupid or all black people are violent, you know straight away what you're dealing with there. If somebody says there's a conspiracy of Jews to control certain media publications and things like that, that takes a little bit of investigation to dig at. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit more sinister in the way that it presents itself as a sort of a pseudo-intellectual argument, and that's why it's more dangerous to me, and it goes unchecked. And a lot of people, I think, have this anti-Semitism and this kind of anti-Jew hatred in their hearts, but don't even realise they've got it because they genuinely think what they're saying is true.
Oh, God, yeah, I've come across loads of people like that.
Yeah, you can learn a lot from somebody via the way they speak about Israel. And I'm not even Jewish, and I kind of feel that I've become quite sensitive to anti-Semitism of late because it is everywhere I look, and it's kind of consumed the left. I keep having to ask, what is your obsession with Palestine? Please, can you sum it up for me why you are so obsessed with this one small skirmish on the other side of the world that has a relatively low body count compared to other. I mean, if you want to talk about oppression, because they always throw up, it's oppression, it's murder.
It's about oppression, but look at the Uyghur Muslims in China. I mean, I don't like the term Islamophobia, and I know you don't. But if you're going to describe, if you're going to use the term Islamophobia, I'd use it in that instance, because these people are being, their culture is being erased. They're allegedly being put in these camps where their identity is being erased, and it's solely because they're Muslims, and so and you barely get a peep out of anybody on this. A lot of even all these Muslim countries who go on and on about Israel and Zionism, suddenly they're all hush hush about their fellow Muslims in China. Why is that? It's all about virtue signalling, really.
But you know what's really crazy about it? So the editor of Five Pillars, or Five Pillars as you so affectionately call it, Roshan M's, it's Sally, I don't know.
He is a bit silly, but Roshan's silly Sally.
Roshan Sally, right? So he tweeted out. I mean, so basically, China, from what we can tell, and the problem is with China is with it being a communist state and it being very restrictive and censorious over what is reported and how it's reported and where else it can be reported outside of China. It's very difficult to get a picture of what's going on. They're very secretive in that sense. They shut down information quicker than nobody. But we seem to know with strong enough evidence that they appear to be oppressing significant numbers of Uyghur Muslims and rounding them up and transferring them and imprisoning them and shaving their heads. All sorts of horrible things I'm hearing, some of which I can't confirm, so I'm not really going to repeat now. So he, the editor of Five Pillars, which is sort of a soft Islamist media website, so he had to find a way to make him the victim. Instead of going mental and banging the drum about what's happening in China, which he should do, and which I join forces with him, I'd quite happily stand shoulder to shoulder with him and protest this. He had to make it about himself and the UK. So he tweeted out, "Anti-Muslim pogroms are a real possibility in the UK in the not too distant future. This is not scaremongering, this is the reality. And if it happens, all those who enabled it, including those respectable politicians and mainstream pundits, will rightly be condemned by history." So he's seeing a real case of genuine overt anti-Muslim oppression happening, and he wants to pretend that this is something the UK is just waiting to do.
Oh my God. Oh, he's such a knob. I mean, what do you expect from a site where one of his reporters, was practically, had an erection over the Hagia Sophia being converted into a mosque again? I mean, God, it's like Islamist porn, basically. So yeah, of course they don't give a shit. It's all about, basically they choose certain fashionable causes and then just jump on that bandwagon, and it's all about virtue signalling, really. As long as you talk about Zionism and Palestinians, then hey, kudos, got some brownie points there.
I'm genuinely interested as to why nobody's talking about this, because I know, I mean, like I've just mentioned, one aspect of it might be the fact that it's very difficult to get information. Maybe it'll just take one video.
I don't think it's that.
What is it?
No, because there are videos that are coming out from China. There's like footage coming out, being smuggled out to show what's happening. And the problem is because so many countries are scared of China. We rely on them so much for business, that they don't want to say anything. I mean, that's certainly the case for Pakistan, because Pakistan is basically a basket case, and because they have so much trade with China, they're depending on them for their own economy. They really can't say anything to the Chinese authorities about the way they're treating their fellow Muslim brothers and sisters. They're basically in denial by it. I mean, Imran Khan, the Prime Minister, he was asked about it. This is someone who goes on and on about Muslim oppression and everything, but doesn't say anything about China. And the reason for that is basically money talks. It's all about financial interests. And I know that we're not exactly, where we can, our country can be hypocrites about this as well. It depends on your own vested interests. I get it. But, the silence on China is certainly not because of the lack of information. I mean, some of it, yes, it does have to be independently verified, but there's a lot of information coming out, and it has been coming out for many, many years. It's not just coming out now. It's just that it's getting more attention now.
All right, I think we started with the question about anti-Semitism. So, I mean,
in short, anti-Semitism is bad then.
Yeah, and in regards to it, I mean, it was Wiley, wasn't it? I mean, we had a little joke about this before we started recording. I hadn't heard of him, you hadn't heard of him. I didn't even know what the fuck grime was, to be honest, but he's quite an influential...
Okay, even I'm, not that sad. I knew what grime
You knew what grime was. Okay, I'm the old man.
I just can't name a single grime, so... I know Stormzy, that's it.
Stormzy. So, what's he called? Wiley, he's a black grime artist, seems to have a significant following, was going on a big, massive anti-Semitic rant, Jewish conspiracy theories. He even released a video of him basically calling out... He's like, bring me your best Jew to debate, as if the Jewish people elect the Uber Jew.
Uber Jew.
You know what I mean?
Ubermensch.
The representative. Yes. I think it's Woody Allen, isn't it? I think it's Woody Allen.
I thought it was Alan Sugar, but I can't be sure.
Something that or Jeff Goldblum.
He's my man. But you know what? But the thing is that seemed to be like the straw that broke the camel's back, because it prompted a lot of celebrities to just walk out of Twitter.
Yeah, I saw that.
I don't know if they deactivated their account or they just didn't tweet for 48 hours. I don't know if that's going to actually achieve anything, but I suppose at least that makes a statement then to Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like anti-Semitism, obviously, but I'm not one of the... my opinions on social media bans haven't changed. I think Wiley should be able to destroy his career by tweeting ad nauseum his anti-Semitic views, and we should be able to respond or not respond or judge him accordingly. I get a little bit annoyed when someone like Priti Patel gets involved and leans on Twitter. Don't think the government should be leaning on social media websites to tell them what they can and can't allow. I understand why people are hurt over it. I understand the historical significance of anti-Semitism and why it's important to keep it in check. But I'd like to remind people as well that with banning it or not allowing it, we can't see it for one, and it doesn't eradicate it, it just pushes it underground, and this thing's already conspiratorial as it is. It's one in the ledger for the conspiracies. Look at Twitter defending and protecting the powerful Jews. So I think society is strong enough to be able to push back against that kind of thing without bans, censorship, and potential jail time here, because I might remind you, in the UK we have hate speech laws, and this grime artist will be investigated by the police. So, I
can't see that going any further. I can't imagine him being jailed for it.
It's difficult. It's difficult to know. I mean, all bets are off when it comes to speech in the UK now, unfortunately. Should we run out another question? Creative Introvert has asked, is it worth engaging at all with far-left cult members?
No. Next.
I always think it's worth...
I don't... What does he mean? As in which cult? Or is he just being funny about certain groups?
I think he's meaning influential far... This is my take on it, so if I've got this wrong, okay. Creative Introvert...
What, like BLM or something?
I think he means if anyone's sufficiently far gone to the left, is it even worth engaging them? Is there anything that good can come of trying to talk to these people?
I think don't rule it out, but I wouldn't waste that much time doing it, because some people, I think people can be persuaded depending where they are on the spectrum, but I think if they're too far gone, it's something that they have to deal with themselves, I guess. It might just be that it doesn't matter what somebody else says online to you, how many debates you have. It might just, solidify your own views on certain issues. It's probably a journey that they have to make themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know. I personally wouldn't waste that much time.
Let's just
trying to convince them otherwise.
Yeah, let's just say they say this hypothetical far left cult member so far gone in their ideology and views that nothing you can possibly say to them can bring them out of it. Now that's a distinct possibility. However, you've got to think in terms of what are your goals. So if you want to engage a far left lunatic, if you can do that publicly and have an audience, there are people on the fringes who aren't decided either way or aren't particularly invested in this argument will see you, and hopefully if you're making sense and better sense than this far left lunatic, will be more convinced by your viewpoints and
I suppose, yeah.
So sometimes it's a case of the third party observing. A lot of the stuff that I do on Twitter isn't particularly conducive to changing the person I'm talking to mind. It's highlighting their inadequacies sometimes or their lack of logic. So I speak to these people differently when I've got an audience versus one-on-one when I'm trying to be more directional in my approach in terms of trying. You don't want to dunk on people all the time. Sometimes it has its uses, sometimes it doesn't have its uses. It's trying to figure out when's the best approach.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It might be useful for other people rather than that person themselves.
Yeah, nailed it. I think that was a very strong July episode myself.
Proper. We dealt with anti-Semitism, racism, white supremacy, spaghetti bolognese,
faith-based, religious terrorism.
Sorry, let me look up the term. What was that bollocks term again? Yeah, faith, claim, terrorism, or terrorist abusing religious motivation. Oh, fuck it. Imagine saying that after you've had a few.
That'd make me want to blow myself up, so it's counter-effective if anything. And on that note, bid you good evening.
Ta-da.
Thank you for listening to the Godless Spellchecker podcast. The podcast is a one-man operation produced in my spare time away from my day job, and I love making it for you. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider lending some support. The show is entirely listener supported. I don't sell anything, I don't run ads, and given the alternative and unpopular focus of my content, it's very unlikely to find a sponsor. So there are a number of ways you can support and chip in and help improve the show and give me more time to produce more content. You can become a patron supporter and pledge a monetary amount per month or per episode by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. If you can't lend monetary support right now, don't worry, there's other ways you can help the podcast too. You can share it on your various social media networks, or take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to it. Your support is massively appreciated. Thank you. Think we've all learned something here today?